Breastfeeding can save over 800,000 children under 5 years, 20,000 women from breast cancer, and more than 300 million, or rather billion US dollars in economic losses. Now, each additional month of paid maternity leave reduces infant mortality rate by 13%. And additionally, every infant and child has the right to good nutrition. This is according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child. This is why the world is observing World Breastfeeding Week, with special focus on making breastfeeding work, if that makes sense. And of course, that's just telling us about the theme of the week. We're focusing on how corporates and organizations can accommodate this very important need of breastfeeding for the advisable amount of time for infant. And that is why in studio this morning we are having experts on the subject that are going to help us understand why this is very important. Now, I have Dr. Emily Njuguna, who's a pediatrician. I also have Dr. Nora Obudha, who's a sexual reproductive health expert with Women Lift. Thank you so much for joining us. And online we're going to be joined by Angelique Mugerente, who is also an expert on matters breastfeeding and of course the health of infants. We shall have her shortly, but I'd just like to focus on that particular theme of the corporate society, organizations enabling or giving mothers an enabling environment to breastfeed for as long as is possible and necessary. And I'll start with you. Just tell us why this is important before I get to you, Dr. Nora.
Right. I think, within healthcare, we are very excited about this year's theme.
Yes.
Centered around supporting women to breastfeed within the workplace. Because traditionally, this has been a forgotten area, because we know that breastfeeding is best for baby. Before the age of 2 years, breastfeeding actually accounts for a majority of the nutritional needs of children. Looking at the age between 0 and 6 months,
yes,
breastfeeding actually takes up 100% of all their nutritional needs. And this is nutrition, looking at the nutritional content, but also the immune protective mechanism that is found within breastfeeding. That's so 0 to 6 months, it accounts for 100% of the nutritional needs. Between 6 months and 12 months, it accounts for about 50%. And after 12 months to 2 years, which is a recommendation by WHO, it can actually accommodate about a third of all their nutritional needs.
Oh, wow.
So breastfeeding is really, really important. Again, beyond nutrition, beyond the immune protective mechanisms that are within breast milk, it also helps organs to develop. Okay, looking at IQ, for example, the intelligence of a child,
wow,
it's actually pegged on how long they've been able to get this essential nutrient within breastfeeding.
Absolutely, and that's why we should accommodate that particular need. Dr. Nora, how are workspaces getting in the way of all these wonderful things that breastfeeding gives to children?
Yeah, work is getting in the way because even from pregnancy, some organizations or institutions do not create that enabling environment for a woman to carry through her reproductive phase of pregnancy. And pregnancy is not just on its own. There's delivery and breastfeeding. And now when we zone on to breastfeeding, for you to be able to produce milk, you need to be not stressed up.
Yes.
If you're not given the time to be at home, you're 3 months or 6 months, and we really advocate for the 6-month maternity leave,
which is a rarity, actually.
Yes, for sure. Then a woman will be able to breastfeed the baby for 6 months. But we find instances where a woman has delivered, in 1 week she's back in the office. Her body has not recovered. Her lactation, in terms of the ability to produce milk optimally, is not enabled because she's not in that space to be able to tend to her child and also tend to work at the same time.
Yes.
So essentially we kill and destroy that opportunity for a woman to have that bonding and to provide food, proper nutrition to her child, because we need to work. And I think that is something we need to change. We have organizations that have implemented a 6-month maternity leave, and I believe it is possible, and other organizations should start looking at that as well.
Yeah, but okay.
And if I could also add to what Dr. Hari is also saying, science has shown that with every additional month of paid leave, there's actually a reduction of 13% in infant mortality.
Oh, wow.
And that speaks to just, the need to have moms and babies not separated too soon before they're ready.
I was just about to ask you, what then if they're not able to get this time happens to the child or even the mother?
Right. There are so many things. So, we have very many regulations that call out the need for paid maternity leave, etc. And in Kenya specifically, we have regulations that call out for 3 months paid maternity leave and 2 weeks paternity leave. However, for most cases, especially in the informal sector, this is not the case.
Yes.
So you find women are paid, on the job, per day, per task. And so, the women have actually to decide between going to work to get something to eat, put something on the table for the family, or breastfeed their child at home. So it's a very delicate balance.
Yeah, and it sounds like a vicious cycle, because for the mother to breastfeed, they need to have a healthy diet, right? To have a healthy diet, you have to have the work, the money, and the work to give you the money to afford that, so that you can in turn feed the baby. So I mean, talk to us about that vicious cycle and the need for a good diet.
Yeah, and so actually what we're doing right now is really lobbying lawmakers, parliamentarians, to look at especially the informal sector. We know that in the formal sector, a lot of companies are really stepping up to the regulations that we have. We have the Constitution of Kenya that calls out for the need to protect nutrition for children. We have the Health Act that calls out the need to have lactation spaces and other things. We have the Employment Act that calls out the need to protect time for moms to be able to stay with their children during their maternity leave. So we have many laws and regulations. We have the Breast Milk Substitutes Act as well that regulates how we are able to promote formula, for example, to women within the community. So we have many regulations that call out this need. However, that's not translating.
It's a matter of implementation, right?
The implementation has been snail pace. So we're really calling out to parliamentarians to especially look at the informal sector, which is the sector that has the greatest need. And I really want to call out a study that was done by UNICEF in Kericho, in one of the tea farms. And so what they did is that they set up lactation spaces, they set up a space where mom could have a child taken care of, a child care center. They really sensitize the managers to be able to give women breaks during their work day, and what they saw was phenomenal. There was actually an increase in the rates of exclusive breastfeeding within that group, the women who are tea pickers, from 20% to 80%, just to say that it can happen, both in the formal and informal sector.
Dr. Nora, I'd like us to speak about the reality on the ground, because if we talk about all these lactation rooms and all nice, wonderful policies, but what's the reality on the ground, and how can we do better?
The reality on the ground is not all organizations, institutions, or governments are implementing, as Dr. Emily has narrated here. That it is not being done. And I think sometimes it's the challenge of what would it cost, because that is how employers will look at it. For a woman to come in already pregnant, would you hire them? So there's a lot of discrimination. They would not be hired because we are anticipating that soon they will be going on maternity leave, they'll be needing to breastfeed, and they'll ask for flexible time. And that is a problem that we are creating in terms of creating gender sensitive spaces, because we have to be able to feed to the needs of the women even as they work, because a woman is going through a reproductive cycle as she's working. So there's the pregnancy, there's the breastfeeding, there's premenopause and menopause, and those things have to be taken care of. So the fear is what it would cost, and the imagination that you're going to lose. You're going to lose, whether it's in profits or productivity. But that is not what it should be. And I think sometimes with organizations that we've talked to, they just don't know what to do. They don't know what it looks like. And for us in Women Lift Health, we're looking at how we can bring senior leaders together. If we can have an institution, for instance, Save the Children and AMREF, who have implemented a 6-month maternity leave, can they speak to other organizations and just share the learnings? What does it really mean? Did it cause them any loss in any way? And this is a natural process for a woman, which must be catered for in the workplace. And it all just goes from paid maternity leave to when she comes back, do we create flexible mechanisms? They can work from home or come in and work for certain hours. We can prepare lactating rooms, have rooms to, with refrigeration for breast milk. It is not impossible. It is just the cycle a woman goes through. And we should take care of both men and women. Men also take their paternity leave to support the women. So this is something that all organizations and institutions should consider and not fear that it's going to come out as a loss.
Or a takeaway.
Or a takeaway, yeah. So that is what we need to address.
Absolutely. And I'm wondering if, okay, Kenya is usually ahead when it comes to, especially the policies and the laws that take care of these matters. Implementation is another subject, but at the very least, we're good on that front. What are other foreign examples of where these things have worked for the betterment of the health of infants and women who have just given birth?
So when we look at lactation support, one of the countries that has been at the forefront of such interventions is a country called Brazil.
Okay.
So Brazil's, for more than 40 years, they have really been advocating for women to breastfeed.
Yes.
And their rates are upwards of 90% for exclusive breastfeeding. We are at 60%. I must say, you know, we are actually one of the few countries that have been able to get to 60%. But really the reality is that we have done better. Actually, from the Kenya Demographic Health Survey, we've actually gone down in 2022 to 60%.
Okay.
But, you know, looking at Brazil, for example, they have lactation management centers in every corner.
Cool.
You know, so women can walk in, get support, and they've also coupled that lactation management and lactation support with something we call human milk banking, where if mom does not have enough supply, she's able to get safe pasteurized milk from the milk bank and then use it to feed her baby, because WHO has actually called out the need to have donor human milk, that is milk that is given by another mother, as a second best option if mother's own milk is not available.
Yeah, in Africa, is that being accepted more? Because I see, I've seen stories and I've seen a few of them in Nairobi. What's the uptake of that like?
Well, it's actually very good. So
cool.
Kenya set up its first human milk bank in 2019. We were the first in Eastern Central Africa to set up one. And this facility was set up in Pumwani, where I previously worked.
Right.
And so we've had that facility running since 2019 to date, heavily supported by the Ministry of Health, heavily supported by the government and the county leadership. And really what we have seen is that the women are literally begging for these services. And so the need within the community is so huge because moms know their innate knowledge is that they need to feed their babies on breast milk. And so, you know, because this facility is catering to Pumwani only, what is happening is that now women are sharing milk informally within the community because they know they're doing the best that they can.
Yes. But it's better if it's in a structured way, right?
Exactly. If we can institutionalize, you know, this donation of human milk and milk sharing, it's much better. And that way we can cushion mothers, because the reality is that formula is out of reach for most of us, including you know, middle class, upper class. It's very expensive, and so we must provide avenues where either mom is breastfeeding successfully to 6 months exclusively, or up to 2 years once she introduces milk. And just to say that it's actually more expensive for us to not breastfeed.
Okay.
Kenya is actually losing about 376 billion shillings. That's a study that was done in 2014. And that's from, you know, health expenditure, because, you know, children under 5 are malnourished. That's because of, you know, losses within the education sector. Children are repeating because their intelligence is not
it's lower.
But really the biggest loss is in productivity. You know, children who are chronically malnourished are just not as productive in their adulthood. So it's actually more beneficial to Kenya to support breastfeeding.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about something I mentioned earlier on about it even saving mothers from the risk of cancer. Speak to us about that, you as from the perspective of a sexual reproductive health expert.
Yes, absolutely. I believe breastfeeding, as it were, it prevents 20,000 you know, deaths from cancer. And we're talking specifically of breast cancer. There's, as I said, the reproductive cycle of a woman. And so if they're able to breastfeed, and then we're able to prevent the breast cancers that may arise from not breastfeeding, what's the value addition? And as she's talking about the economic losses, we know what cancer means and what the cancer burden is, over and above the cost, you know, the stress it brings to families, looking at what they have to spend, the loss of a mother, and what it means to a household and society, an orphaned child. So I think these are the things we really need to look at as we advocate for breastfeeding. Over and above preventing the deaths under children under 5, we're looking at how it is also beneficial for the mother. Even in terms of even after delivery, immediately putting the child on breast also helps the uterus contract and prevent other bleeding processes that a woman might experience
Okay.
at delivery. So there's all the benefit
I know, yeah.
to breastfeed and optimally breastfeed and meet the 6-month mark.
Yeah, it's interesting because we only think about the baby, but there's the baby, the
This
mother, the future leaders, and the future minds, you know, and the economy. So this is very wide, and we're going to continue on with this particular conversation. We are with Dr. Emily Njuguna as well as Dr. Nora Obudo, and let's just shift gears to another story that is ongoing. Interior CS Professor Kithure Kindiki is at the moment appearing before the Parliamentary Committee on Education to discuss the fate of teachers working in hardship areas. The committee is particularly interested in security accorded to teachers in arid and semi-arid areas. Let's take a look.
Have been spending in police stations. What can be done to be able to help these teachers deal with this problem?
Thank you. You're proceeding?
Just the final one. I know some members want to be sensational, but I will just try to ask my last question and wait for the second round.
Yeah, what's the point of order? Why is he saying that some members want to be sensational?
Okay, I withdraw that statement.
You withdraw that statement?
I withdraw that statement.
Yes.
But it will appear, it will come up, I know.
Honorable Abdul, you are out of order.
Okay, I withdraw that statement.
Yes.
Is the minister aware? You've mentioned that one of your recommendations is that you've recommended that TSC should pay, for example, air flights for the teachers, especially during the closure and opening of schools for facilitating. Is the minister aware that right now the non-local teachers who are in Northeastern, particularly in Mandera and Wajir, are not able to travel by road to their stations because the police at every roadblock will not even allow them to pass that roadblock in PSVs unless they fly to those regions? And I was asking, is it possible, like the arrangement you have in Lamu, I'm aware you're using military choppers to transport teachers to schools during opening and closure. Is it possible to use military choppers to facilitate these teachers to travel from their local stations to... Yeah. Thank you.
Final, be very brief, Honorable Taitumu.
Okay, thank you, On Chair. Wasiri, mine will be very brief. But having been a teacher when a chair and a senior member of the Kenya National Union of Teachers, I understand the complexities compounded in Northeastern as far as issues of teachers are concerned. But I want to ask this. Waziri said that most of teachers are killed at police stations. He told us that he will say why, but Waziri have not told us why.
All right, we shall get back to that. We are expecting Professor Kithure Kindiki to speak to the committee, the National Assembly Committee on Education, on the safety of teachers in arid and semi-arid areas and measures that can actually be put in place to ensure that they are safe. But back here in studio, we are discussing breastfeeding, the benefits. We have already talked about how it can help the infant, how it helps the mother, especially when it comes to the risk associated with cancer. Also, we have talked about how this how this can actually affect the intelligence of the child if they don't get enough breast milk, and of course the future economy of the country. So as a country, globally, this is very, very important. I want to dig into HIV and the risk of infecting children through breastfeeding and what has been done in terms of science to ensure that women and children alike are protected, So we are joined by our third guest via Zoom. She is Angelique Mugirente, who's joining us from Kigali, Rwanda. Angelique, I hope you can hear me. Unmute yourself so that you can be part of the conversation. Please tell us about the importance of breastfeeding, as well as where the HIV factor, how it comes in, and why we should be paying close attention to that as well.
Thank you so much. Good morning. I have been following what you have been saying, and I wanted to, before talking about HIV and breastfeeding, I wanted to add a few something. I wanted to add the use of burning calories and then while making milk.
Yes.
And then the mother will somehow be fit and lose weight, and she will not become fat after, as it usually we can observe it while during the breastfeeding period. Thank you.
Okay.
So talking about HIV, we know this is a pandemic we are living in. It is advised, WHO advised women to breastfeed even if they are HIV positive, but they have to be under antiretroviral treatment. It is advisory to consult healthcare providers to have the advice about how to combine breastfeeding and this HIV status.
Indeed.
We know that consequences of HIV and the consequences of not having sufficient nutrient and sufficient nutrition for the child is not balancing. When you are balancing between having not breastfeeding the child and breastfeeding WHO advised to breastfeed and being under antiretroviral viruses, it's better. Thank you.
That's very important. And we have also spoken about the risk of cancer when it comes to women not being able to breastfeed for as long a time as is medically recommended. Speak to us about that scenario, particularly with the perception of your own perception being in Rwanda, a different African country from the one we are in right now.
Yes, you have been talking about breastfeeding will prevent mothers from not only breast cancer but also ovarian cancers.
Okay.
This is very crucial, and as healthcare professionals, we must advise our mothers not only on benefits of the child but also the benefit on the side of mothers.
And what about the policies that are being implemented or in place in Rwanda when it comes to enabling mothers who are working be able to comfortably breastfeed their babies?
Oh, this is very nice in Rwanda. Normally, mothers, they have 6 weeks paid, 3 months paid, while they are breastfeeding. And if they want, they can add this time, and an effort was put in breastfeeding, while healthcare professionals advise mothers to have milk to refrigerate it while they are going to work. And some of our companies are encouraging mothers to bring their child even at the work. They are accommodating them. This is a very good thing to be done for breastfeeding period.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Angelique, and we shall be getting back to you shortly. I'd like to bring back in our studio guest, Dr. Obudo. We talked about the workspaces, the corporate settings, the more affluent type of things. But what kind of interventions can be made for women in urban settlements? What can happen to make things better for them?
Right. I think this is the challenge with the balance. You need to work, you need to feed your family, you have your child. What I'm looking at is, of course, ensuring that women are having that pay to support them, that they don't have to go out every day to look for it. And if they do, can we support them? For instance, I'm looking at the banks.
Yes.
Because really, when you're working and you're under stress, your milk production will go down. And so that's why when I look at the idea that has been implemented and rolled out in Kenya as a first, having the milk banks is an option. And I believe probably the number of people who are accessing the milk banks are coming from probably the informal settlements as a support to augment what they're already producing. I know it is a tough one for the informal settlement, as it's the reality, but I wish we could be a bit more sustainable in terms of how we are paying these women or buffering them in, so that they.
Do you think there should be like a fund for new mothers?
Yeah, it would be really.
Helpful?
Helpful, recommended, highly recommended.
Yes.
Yeah, that you can have a buffer for women. We can have, even as much as they're in the informal settlements, can they work half a day and the other half they're able to tend and care for their children?
Right.
Can they have maternity leave?
Yes,
so that's why the buffer fund would be able to support that kind of intervention. So that's how I'd look at it at the informal settlement. So,
okay, go ahead.
And if I could add, I think one of the things that we have to realize is that the Constitution applies to all people in Kenya. The Health Act applies to all people in Kenya, not to the affluent only, but also the people in the informal settlement. The Employment Act, the same. And so really, I think we need to introspect as society and for example, examine, the people who work under us, our house managers. Do we allow them breaks to express milk if they're breastfeeding?
Yes.
Do we even employ them in the first place if they're pregnant and breastfeeding?
Yeah.
Do we allow them to go for 3-month break as we are allowed within the formal sector? And so just realizing that all these regulations and laws apply across board. And really this informal sector is one of the sectors that has really been neglected over many years. And we're really lobbying, especially with Parliament, to enforce it across board, so that the rights that the middle class and upper class enjoy can also be enjoyed, by the informal sector, because really they are all Kenyans at the end of the day. And all these laws, the Employment Act, Health Act, the Constitution, Children's Act as well, applies to all of us.
Let's talk about the possibility of having a law that will prevent mothers and their babies being separated. Is that even possible, Dr. Budo?
I think nothing is impossible.
It's impossible.
Nothing is impossible.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really the argument is always what's the value add, and that's what we've talked about. Preventing of under-child deaths and even higher, the cancer prevention. We know the economic burden that comes with all this unwarranted and preventable deaths. So there's all the value add as to why we should pass this law for a healthier nation at the end of the day. If you're going to achieve universal health coverage, we need all the players in place. We need the mother, we need the child, we need the man, we need whole families and societies to achieve this. So for me, if a law can be passed, we take care of both informal and formal sectors. I think it's all beneficial for everyone, including the politicians.
Let's rope in Angelique. Angelique is joining us live from Kigali, Rwanda. Angelique, could you speak to us about the possibility of having funds for mothers in urban settlements? What is the situation in Rwanda, and what do you feel can be done to make things more comfortable for new mothers?
As Dr. Nola said, robbing have been done by the Parliament. Now, mothers are they have 3 months paid while they are breastfeeding, and robbing from the Parliament. We have private and public sectors that are vandalizing money to pay those mothers after 3 months if they want to be in to continue being at home and breastfeed their child. This is a good thing, and I appreciate it. When you want to breastfeed for the rest of 3 months, you stay home and you are paid half of your salary. This is vandalizing from private and public sector.
Indeed. And I'd like us to get into the nitty-gritty of handling the infant also, because I do understand breastfeeding for any mother, experienced or not, can be challenging. But then we have the situation where we're having a lot of cases of teen pregnancies. Could you speak to us about the gap in information or in even the know-how of how to breastfeed, how long, and just the being green, being a child, having born a child,
So in Kenya, actually, our rates of teenage pregnancies have actually gone up, and it's an alarming situation, because as our teenage pregnancies go up, our rates of new infections among adolescents with HIV also goes up, and so there's a gap. We must recognize that. And so, for the teenagers, they are a special group. They are very vulnerable, and they need special care. So looking at the support that we can give them, let's start with the health system. So within the health system, there are very many touch points where we meet patients. And this starts from before delivery, the antenatal point to during delivery and beyond. And so teenage pregnancies actually need support from the antenatal point when they get pregnant,
yes,
to be able to eat well so that they have adequate nutrition to support this pregnancy to term, to transfer adequate nutrients to her baby so that her baby is born healthy. But beyond delivery, we also need to support these teenagers to be able to breastfeed their children the same way we older women are able to do up to 6 months. And then they can be supported to go back to school because school is important for them as well. But really, a lot of education needs to be done within, the school system to be able to, sensitize these teenagers to know that teenage pregnancies is not something that they want to get into, because it reduces their chances of going back to school, which is really important. And they also miss out on their childhood as well, because a child taking care of a child is a very precarious situation. And so teenagers really need a lot of support. They need avenues where they can expend their energy, they can utilize that energy for, in productive ways to be able to, further their education, but also, other ways to be able to generate income is also important.
Right. Dr. Obudo, do you feel like teenage pregnancies further complicate this need to get children breastfed for longer?
Yeah, it complicates it. I mean, a teenager's mind is not completely mature. They're already going through the whole process of being an adolescent. There's so many changes. You're trying to figure out who you are, what you're about, what's happening to my body. Then you get pregnant. And when the teenage gets pregnant, it's always the girl. The boy continues on, but this is now this girl, this teenage girl who is in this situation. And if they're looking at that whole process of breastfeeding, the confidence, how do you even communicate when they're still struggling with this face of teenagehood, when they're being set apart from everyone and stigmatized from whether it's peers or even parents or auntie so and so and uncle so and so, you're a bad girl, as if she was on it alone. But she essentially ends up being the focus because she's the one whose pregnancy is showing, and she's the one who has to take care of this child. And of course, there's that whole process where she's being shunned. Can you take that information? Will you be able to take that information from the health system? If the health system is not making an environment for teenagers and adolescents, because putting teenagers and adolescents in the same room with adults, that is already a hindrance. A hindrance to even taking in information on that you're pregnant, you've delivered, you need to breastfeed for the next 6 months, you need to look for food.
So they need specialized care?
They need specialized care. Yeah, they have to have tailored care for their needs and the phase in which they're going through. I mean, they're grappling, I'm going to miss school. The society is looking at me this way. My mom and my dad are looking at me this way. So they need full support from family, peers, community, society, and as well as the government. But I always say, what do we need to do before we get there? Comprehensive sexual education is still something we have to have in the schools. We have to talk about what processes are going on in your body that you can get pregnant. This is how to prevent pregnancy. These are the consequences of pregnancy when you're not mind ready and body ready, because there are also risks to a body that is not ready to carry.
Having to do it.
Exactly. Your pelvic is not ready to carry that pregnancy. So there's all that risk even of death for the girls.
For the young girls.
So those are things we need to look at. Tailored support.
Tailored support, especially for the young mothers. Let's rope in Angelica. I wonder what the situation is in terms of teen pregnancies and them even being able to go all the way to breastfeeding. What's the situation in Rwanda, and what is your overview on how they should be handled or helped when it comes to breastfeeding their young ones?
Thank you so much. In Rwanda, I wanted to share the experience of Rwanda. We are not encouraging a teenage to have pregnancies, but we have what is called youth corners in every health center. We have our health system is built as from the health post, health center. The health center is one of the small entity of our health system. So we have in every health center what is called youth corners, where we teach, where healthcare providers are helping teenagers to prevent those pregnancies. So if it happens to have those pregnancies, they are supported.
Right.
They are supported or in the community, or we encourage community workers to educate them they are known, they are supported by the government, they are supported by NGOs, they are supported especially by those youth corners, so that they are taught how to breastfeed their child, how to prevent malnutrition, what benefit from breastfeeding their child before going back to the school. So even if it is not a good thing to have teenage pregnancies, but in Rwanda they are supported, and we are doing our best so that those children are not being malnourished. They are provided additional nutrition while they reach more than 6 months.
Oh wow, that's actually lovely. Perhaps something Kenya could copy from Rwanda. Yeah, those youth corners, just particularly to help the young teen mothers. Before I get to the closing remarks, I'd like you to tell us or dispel some of the myths surrounding breastfeeding in Kenya, in Africa, or some of the crazy things you've heard in your practice.
So there are many.
Yes,
there are many. You know, we were just discussing right now how in some cultures actually it's believed that men benefit more from breast milk than women.
I actually saw a trending video about a certain country where men are now denying the children breast milk. Yeah.
And really, for an adult, the benefit is more to the child, because you know children's immune systems are not well developed, and so they're the ones who need the immune components or the immunoactive substances within milk to protect them from disease and help them to grow and develop. Adults have developed.
Yes, you're right.
So that's one of the.
Yes.
But the other thing around breastfeeding is that it is true that you know women, breastfeeding can actually forestall pregnancy to some degree, but it is not forever. So breastfeeding to 2 years does not guarantee that you will be, you know, you can prevent pregnancy at 2 years, for example. You need to couple that with family planning,
contraception,
you know, and birth spacing, so that you know you're ready, your family is ready for another baby. And Dr. Nora, you can also add a few.
You said adults have no business breastfeeding. Breastfeeding is not contraception. Dr. Nora, do you have another?
No, I think it's a myth, and also in a way, if it is extended too far, then it becomes problematic. And it's the issue around how long you breastfeed a child, because we talk about 2 years, and we know, like for some of the women, breastfeeding is a way of maintaining your weight, right? But you find that there's some women who will extend it on to 5 to 7 years of breastfeeding of a child, and really that should not be extending beyond that period, just for the sake of maintaining your weight. So those are some of the things.
And there's the maintaining the look of your breasts. Some women prefer not to actually breastfeed. Is that a thing?
Yes, because they imagine that the breasts are going to sag eventually. So after that expansion, the stretch marks and things that happen. But these are also natural processes, right? You're going through a reproductive cycle.
So a bit of body positivity is needed.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Okay. I'd like to start with Angelique with the closing remarks. Angelique, would you like to sum this conversation up? What would you say as far as the theme of this year and this year's breastfeeding week goes?
I would like to add that seeing the benefits of breastfeeding for mothers and babies, this is I can say that this is the gift from the heaven. So let us as healthcare providers, we know what is the benefit, we know how it can be done. Let us work together, work as a team, and advise our mothers to breastfeed child and build their life, the better life for tomorrow.
All right, Dr. Emily Juguna, your closing remarks?
Yes, I think for me is to just encourage all sectors to put all hands on deck so that we can support women to breastfeed. As a country, we are losing 6.9% of our GDP just managing the consequences of malnutrition. And this is a huge saving. We're talking about more than 300 billion Kenya shillings every year. And really, you know, we need parliamentarians on board, we need managers, employers on board, we need communities to support these women so that they can breastfeed appropriately. But also to mention that, you know, as a country, we've done well with our rates of breastfeeding. We are one of the few countries, as I mentioned, who's above 60 and above percent having exclusively breastfeeding their babies. However, we can do better. We've actually done better.
There's room for growth.
There's room for growth, and we can actually increase our rates of exclusive breastfeeding and initiation of breastfeeding within 1 hour of delivery. They've both reduced to 60%, but there's room for improvement.
Okay, Dr. Nora, your closing remarks.
My remarks here is that breastfeeding is part of a reproductive cycle for every woman, and it's a right that they should be able to get pregnant and breastfeed their child and go through premenopause and menopause, and institutions must and need to look at the positives of this and support women in the workplace to thrive even as they go through their reproductive cycle.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, ladies. Dr. Nora Obudo is an SRHR expert and also Director, Women Lift Health. Also, we had Dr. Emily Njuguna, who's a pediatrician, and all the way from Kigali, Rwanda, we had Angelique Mugirente, who's a maternal, newborn, and child expert. Thank you so much, ladies, for this very comprehensive conversation on the importance